Hi friends, Bob Bordone here, and this week we're going to take a look at a video of an interview between CNN's Jake Tapper and Deputy White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller that has gone absolutely viral. Let's take a look.
We live in a world in which you can talk all you want about international niceties and everything else, but we live in a world, in the real world, Jake, that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power. These are the iron laws of the world that have existed since the beginning of time.
But in terms of day-to-day operations in Venezuela, that is acting President Rodriguez, right? It's not some sort of American emissary.
What I'm saying is, we'll keep going here, Jake, so I want to say what I'm saying and then you'll follow up. But what I'm saying is just one level above that, which is that by definition, we are in charge because we have the United States military stationed outside the country. We set the terms and conditions. We have a complete embargo on all of their oil and their ability to do commerce. So for them to do commerce, they need our permission. For them to be able to run an economy, they need our permission. So the United States is in charge. The United States is running the country during this transition period.
So it turns out there are literally thousands of analysis of that 1 minute clip of what was essentially about a 9-minute interview between Tapper and Miller. And truth is, there is a lot that could be said from many perspectives here. So as some of you know, I am a lawyer, and from the perspective of law, there's a lot that could be said around the relevance of international law in global politics. But I'm not going to do that here today. Today, I want to analyze that colloquy between Tapper and Miller from the perspective of negotiation and see what wisdom and insights we can take from it. So there's so many ways we can look at this clip. We can look at it from the perspective of international law. We can look at it from the perspective of diplomacy and international relations and political science. Or we can look at it from the perspective of morality and ethics. And they're all really interesting perspectives, and I'm going to leave that to the lawyers and the diplomats and the theologians and the ministers. I want to take a look at that clip and extract some insights and some lessons from the perspective of negotiation. Here's why I want to focus on negotiation. Because many people have expressed all sorts of shock and horror at what Stephen Miller says in that very brief clip. But from the perspective of negotiation, the truth is that what he says there is actually the way most people in the universe approach their negotiations. He just says it in somewhat direct and maybe somewhat raw terms. But the truth of the matter is that most people, when they negotiate from a perspective of power and a perspective of leverage. And I can't tell you how many times when I'm working with clients or teaching negotiation, folks are really, really focused on how do we get more leverage? How do we get more power? With the idea being that if you have power and you have leverage, you actually will get a better deal for yourself. And that is essentially what Miller is saying here. That because the United States has the power, there in fact is a huge military right off the shore of Venezuela, and there is no oil that can be sold without the permission of the United States, that therefore the United States will get its way. The iron law throughout centuries is that might makes right. That is really central to so much in negotiation. So I don't think we should dismiss this. I think many of us actually take this approach when we negotiate. And the truth of the matter is that in a negotiation, if you have more power or leverage and there's a 10-point pie to be divided, usually you can use that power or leverage to extract 6 of those 10 points, 7 of those 10 points, maybe sometimes even 8 of those 10 points. And so Miller has a really important point here. But that's where he has it right. I want to spend some time today telling you where, from a negotiation perspective, I'm not talking morals or laws or ethics, but from a negotiation perspective, where Miller kind of has it wrong. So for those of you who are new to negotiation or new to my channel, let me share some insights based both on negotiation research and also on more than 2 decades of practice and training and coaching and negotiation. Insight number 1, which is really critical to why Miller's understanding here is so cramped, is that great negotiators understand that part of what makes a negotiator great is the ability to expand the size of the negotiation pie before dividing it. So if we go back to the example I was using earlier, if there's a 10-point pie and you have more leverage, you could often get 6 or 7 points of that pie. But in negotiation, when we move beyond a positional approach to actually think about the underlying interests of the parties, and then when we work collaboratively with the other side to achieve those interests, it is almost always the case that we can take a negotiation pie that looked purely distributive, that looked like it was only worth 10 points, and make it worth 20 or 40 or 100 points, and then divide it. And here's the mathematical reality. If I can make a 10-point pie even worth 20 points, and then I can get 10 of those 20 points, 10 is a better outcome for me than 6 or 7. So the deal for me is better. It's not an act of kindness. It's not an act of charity. It's not an act of free will. It's actually an act of self-interest. And so all of the negotiation research has shown that this ability to work with the other side, to move past positions and haggling, to get at underlying interests, and then to work with the other side to brainstorm some ways to meet those interests, creates additional value. So that is insight number 1. Insight number 2, which is born of empirical research, has shown that when negotiation parties describe the counterparty as being trustworthy, as being someone where there's a strong relationship, they are more likely to not only reach a deal with the other side, but to reach a deal that optimizes or finds the most mutual gain. So some of this research was done by Jared Curhan, who's a professor at MIT Sloan in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and using an instrument that he calls a subjective value instrument. So quite apart from his research, intuitively, if I were to ask you, who are the people that you most enjoy working with, that you come up with the most creative ideas, that in some way has sustained the test of time, even in times of turbulence? It's unlikely that you would say to me, the person who always has their throat on my neck, the person who's always doing 1,000 tips and tricks and bargaining tactics. You'd probably say somebody who tells you what really matters to them, is curious about what really matters to you, and then will actually sit down and think constructively with you about how to achieve that. And even though negotiations often really seem like they're one-off, right? I'm buying a car, I'm buying a house. This is not my best friend. It's not even my business partner. The truth of the matter is that even those kinds of negotiations have these opportunities to create additional value. So I'll tell you a story about the purchase of my own house some years ago. The seller actually had a very quick and very firm take it or leave it offer. My house in Cambridge, Massachusetts was at the time very much in a seller's market. There was not a lot of leverage that I had. And so it would have been very easy to just say either I'll take it or take a hike. But instead what I did is I did a little bit of research about this person, and I learned that actually she was an interior designer and she cared enormously about the feel of her own house that she was selling. And so I approached her and said, I wonder if there are some ways that you could offer me some interior design advice. You've lived in this house. Frankly, there's some things in the house that I quite like that I'd love to keep. And I wonder if there's some way here that we can create some extended value that might feel good for you, because I know in some sense you're sad to be moving to California and this house has meant a lot to you. And that frankly would be helpful to me because I don't have much of a sense of style, because trust me, I don't. And also, frankly, would really like to get some of the stuff in your house. Well, that turned out for me to be free interior design consulting. She, in fact, threw in all the furniture that I wanted. And there was some benefit for her too. She had this kind of psychic value of feeling like her imprint was still going to be on this house even after she walked away. The point here is that building a relationship of trust helps us expand that negotiation pie. Whereas if you just stay in the take it or leave it, my way or the highway, I have the leverage, we lose those opportunities. Third and final reason why Miller's my way or the highway, the iron law of humanity from the beginning of time, where might makes right, actually is quite limited and quite cramped when it comes to negotiation. And it's research that has shown ignoring the intangible interests of the other side at times can backfire in ways that are quite unexpected. So what do I mean by intangible interests? Well, there's research that shows that as human beings, we all have an interest in feeling heard, in feeling respected, and in being treated fairly. And when those interests are not met, at times, human beings will actually say no to something that is analytically better for them because their intangible interest of fair treatment, for example, isn't being met. So let me walk you through very quickly an example around what is called ultimatum games. So without boring you to tears, an ultimatum game is a game where I, as the experimenter, will give you, let's say, $10. And I'll tell you, you are paired up with somebody who doesn't know who you are, and you don't know who they are. But they know you've been given $10. And you have to make an offer of any amount of that $10 that you want. And if they say yes to that offer, you will pay what they offer, and you will keep the rest. And if they say no to that offer, then they will get nothing, and you get nothing. That's what's called the ultimatum. Now, from a pure economic perspective, you with the $10 have all the power. You should offer them a penny. And if they are rational, they should say yes, because they'll be better with the penny than with nothing. Research shows, first of all, that most people offer between $4 and $6. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is that the research has shown that when people in your shoes who have the $10 make offers that are less than $3, there's a very high percentage of people who reject that offer. And this is surprising because they are rejecting a free $3. And they're doing it for a very particular reason. And the reason is they know you've been given 10 and they feel ripped off that you're only offering them 1 or 2 or 250. So that research transfers into real life. Let's look at a real life example. Over the past year and a half, the United States has imposed very steep tariffs on our biggest trading partner, which is our neighbors to the north, Canada. Now, the truth of the matter is that in the trade relationship between the United States and Canada, the United States has all the leverage. The Canadians, frankly, are not in a great position to just say some version of take a hike, United States. But while they have temporarily acceded, in the meanwhile, they've done a whole bunch of other really interesting moves. So, for example, they announced a new trade arrangement with Mexico. In addition, Canada has entered into a defense pact with the EU. And this week, as I record this, the Canadian Prime Minister is in China on a state visit with the Chinese president, negotiating new trade terms. So what's happening here is that in the short term, Canada has no choice. They don't have the leverage. But what they're doing is making a whole bunch of other deals to improve their leverage for a later date. And so when we ignore these interests around feeling respected, feeling fairly treated, feeling seen, what happens is the other side either is incentivized to just say no, or they reluctantly say yes and spend a bunch of their time improving what's called their BATNA, their best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So, as someone who has written and taught and talked about and coached on negotiation for 30 years, I just want to say I am really sympathetic to what Miller says here. And there are so many examples of folks using their power and leverage to get their way. It works a lot. But also, from a negotiation perspective with best practices, I want to say it's a mistake because you end up leaving value on the table. You end up breaking relationships, which means that you increase the likelihood of impasse. And lastly, by not meeting the interests of the other side to feel fairly treated, you incentivize them to improve their BATNA so that they don't have to deal with you in the future. So if you want some more tips on how to be the best negotiator you can be, please subscribe to my channel and keep on watching the next video. See you next week. Want to be a better negotiator? Watch this next video.